The mountain lodge stood silent except for the sound of wind howling against glass, and inside that silence, a man's world was ending. Nicholas Marino, 47 years old, built like someone who had survived things that should have killed him, stood at the nursery window with his shoulders pressed against the frame. His dark eyes, storm gray in certain light, fixed on the crib below, a specialized medical crib worth $23,000, lined with thermal blankets that cost more than most people's cars. Inside that crib lay his son. 6 months old. Motionless from the waist down. The 3 doctors stood near the warming table, their white coats crisp and clean, their expressions carved from stone. Outside, December snow fell in sheets that turned the world into white static. "The spinal damage is permanent," Dr. Reeves said. Her voice carried the practiced gentleness of someone who delivered death sentences every day. "Birth trauma. The nerves were severed during delivery. There is nothing we can do." Nothing. Nicholas did not move. His hands, which had held a gun since he was 16 years old, which had made grown men weep and beg, remained at his sides. "We have spent $150,000, he said. His voice came out like venom dripped slowly into still water. "And you tell me nothing can be done?" "That's our professional assessment," Dr. Reeves said. $150,000. Gone. His son's legs would never work. Never carry him. Never let him run. The boy would spend his life in a wheelchair, in a bed, in the margins of a life not fully lived. Just like Nicholas's own childhood, watching his father bleed out on a kitchen floor when Nicholas was 16, watching his mother disappear into grief so profound she forgot she had a son. The door opened. A woman stood in the doorway, rain-soaked and small, wearing a coat that hung on her frame like it belonged to someone else. Her hair was wet and plastered to her neck. She couldn't have weighed more than 115 pounds. Her eyes were the color of wet earth, and they were hollow with the specific emptiness that comes from carrying too much for too long. Tony and Pietro moved immediately, their hands dropping to their sides, their bodies shifting to block her path. In 15 years of working for Nicholas Marino, they had learned to move as one organism. Nicholas raised one hand. "Stop." The woman approached the crib without introduction, without permission, like she was pulled forward by something neither invisible nor gentle. She knelt beside the specialized medical crib, her knees cracking against the marble floor, and placed her scarred hands on the baby's small legs. Both her wrists bore thin white marks like precise cuts, evidence of a life spent surviving things no one should survive. She began to hum. The sound was low and rhythmic, something between a prayer and a lullaby, something that came from somewhere ancient and protected inside her chest. The hum vibrated through the room, and the doctors exchanged looks of confusion. Nicholas felt his breathing change. The baby's toes moved. One small twitch. One tiny flexing of muscle that the specialists had said would never flex again. Dr. Reeves gasped. She stepped forward, her eyes widening as the baby's entire foot shifted, then the other foot, then both legs at once, the thermal blanket rising and falling as the child's body responded to whatever this broken woman was doing. "What is this?" Pietro whispered. His hand moved to his gun out of pure instinct, the instinct that said impossible things were dangerous. But Nicholas did not move. His eyes, which had watched empires fall and men die and his own father's blood stain the kitchen tiles, fixed on this small woman kneeling beside his son. And something in his chest cracked open, something that had been sealed shut since the day he was 16 years old and learned that the world does not protect anyone. The woman continued to hum, her scarred hands moving across the baby's legs with such gentleness that it broke something inside him that he did not know was still breakable. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming tomorrow. Now let us go back to the beginning, to understand how Elena Harper became invisible, and how a man like Nicholas Marino, a man built from violence and vengeance, came to find her on a November night when the rain fell like a curse and changed everything. Rewind. 14 days earlier. The parking lot of the Riverside Hotel smelled like wet concrete and the specific staleness of a place where people came to disappear. Elena Harper pushed a cart laden with folded towels through the underground garage, the fluorescent lights humming like angry insects. Her shift had begun at 5 in the morning and it was now 10 at night. 17 hours of making beds, scrubbing bathrooms, listening to people demand things she could not afford to give them. In her pocket, $17.32. This had to last until Thursday. Her phone buzzed. A text from the shelter coordinator, Mrs. Patterson, Emma's asthma inhaler is empty. Doctor says a refill costs $247. Do you have any way to help with this? Elena stopped moving. She stood very still beside a black Mercedes, her reflection fragmented in the polished hood, and read the message 3 times as if the numbers might change. $247. She had $17.32. Harper, you're moving too slow, a voice called from across the garage. Douglas Hale stood near the service entrance, his expensive suit pristine despite the late hour, his salt and pepper hair perfectly arranged. He was 52 but moved like a man with no conscience, which is to say, he moved very freely. Rooms 502 and 503 still need turnover. I need it done in the next 30 minutes. Yes, sir, Elena said. She pocketed her phone and kept pushing the cart. In 30 minutes, those rooms would be done. They always were. Douglas Hale owned the Riverside Hotel and 3 others like it, monuments to the particular cruelty of people who charge the poor to survive. Rent by the hour rooms. No questions asked. No judgment. Just $8 per hour for Elena, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, $320 before taxes. Which meant $280 after taxes. Which meant $4 and something per hour after taxes divided into her rent, her phone bill, her transportation, her food. No room for Emma's inhaler. No room for anything. She pushed the cart into the elevator, listened to the cables groan, felt the small vibration of ascent. Her body moved through the motions while her mind calculated, which was what exhaustion did, it turned human beings into calculating machines. Room 502 was empty except for stains on the carpet and a smell like desperation and old cigarettes. She changed the sheets, scrubbed the bathroom, pulled used condoms from under the bed. She did not think about the people who had been here. She could not afford to think about people. People required empathy, and empathy required energy she did not have. By 10:08 at night, both rooms were pristine. Fresh white sheets. Gleaming porcelain. A perfectly erased history of human suffering. She clocked out at 11:03. The drive home took 40 minutes in the dark. Her 2008 Honda Civic, which had 147,000 miles on it and sounded like something was dying inside the engine, carried her through the rain-slicked streets of San Francisco toward the neighborhood where she lived. The Tenderloin. The place where people like her were warehoused. Her apartment was a studio that cost $850 a month, which meant nearly 3 months' salary went to rent alone. It was small enough that she could touch both walls if she stretched her arms, and it smelled like mold and old carpet and the particular despair of a place where hope came to die. She did not turn on the lights. She sat on her mattress, still wearing her work clothes, and opened her laptop. The screen illuminated her face, hollow and exhausted, 29 years old but looking like someone who had already lived 3 lives. She opened her bank account. $203 remained. With the $17.32 in her pocket, that gave her $220.32 in the world. The $150,000 emergency surgery Sophie Langford had threatened to pursue against Emma if Elena didn't make the next payment suddenly felt even more impossible than it had yesterday. Sophie, Emma's official legal guardian at the shelter, had made her position clear: find money, or Emma disappears into the system. Find money, or the child Elena had loved for 4 years would vanish. Elena placed her forehead against the laptop screen, felt the small warmth of it, and let herself breathe. Outside, November rain began to fall. The kind of rain that sounded like the world was crying and would not stop for a very long time. She did not know that in 5 hours, her car would break down on the highway heading south. She did not know that 3 black SUVs would pull up through the rain. She did not know that a man named Nicholas Marino would step into the darkness and change everything she thought she understood about survival. She only knew that she had $220.32, and the people she loved needed everything. In the sprawling hills of San Francisco, where Victorian mansions clung to steep inclines like expensive ornaments, there lived a young woman named Elena Harper. To the wealthy family she served, she was nearly invisible, just another girl in worn sneakers, moving through their lives like a ghost, quiet and faithful and completely forgettable. She was 29 years old but carried herself like someone much older, someone who had learned long ago that taking up space was a luxury she could not afford. The Langford mansion in Pacific Heights was a study in controlled perfection. 8 bedrooms. 4.5 bathrooms. A kitchen with marble countertops and Italian tile. And in the basement, converted into a room barely wider than a closet, Elena slept on a thin mattress that smelled of mildew and old linens. She could lie on her back and touch both walls if she stretched her arms. The space had no window. A bare bulb hung from the ceiling, and the concrete floor was always cold, even in summer. Every morning, Elena woke at 5 o'clock. Not because an alarm demanded it, but because her body had learned to survive on less sleep, less food, less hope. She dressed herself in the dark, pulling on the same 2 pairs of work pants she owned, the black ones and the slightly less worn black ones. Then she climbed the wooden stairs that led from the basement into the mansion proper, and the world of the Langfords opened around her like a mouth waiting to swallow her whole. Emma Langford was 6 years old, with blonde curls that fell past her shoulders and eyes that still held the kind of light that had not yet been broken by the world. Elena loved her with a fierceness that surprised her every single day. She loved her the way you love something you are terrified of losing, the way you hold something fragile and know that any moment could shatter it completely. Elena dressed Emma in clothes that cost more than Elena earned in a month. Petit bateau dresses in soft pink. Hand-knitted cardigans from a boutique in Marin County. Shoes that had been specially ordered from Paris, their leather so soft it felt like skin. Emma sat still while Elena braided her blonde curls, and sometimes the child would reach up and squeeze her hand, a small gesture of affection that Elena kept locked in her chest like a secret that could save her life. Sophie Langford, Emma's mother, never looked at Elena directly. She issued commands while scrolling through her phone, her voice flat and mechanical. Emma needs to be at the botanical garden by 9. Her piano lesson is at 3. Do not be late. And Elena, these floors are unacceptable. I can see dust. There was no dust. Elena had swept 3 times that morning. Sophie was 43, with the kind of aggressive thinness that came from discipline rather than genetics. Her hair was cut in a precise bob that framed her face like a frame framing a picture. She wore jewelry that clinked when she moved, a Rolex that caught the light, diamond earrings the size of small stones, a wedding band that matched the one worn by her husband, Michael, a man Elena had seen perhaps 5 times in 4 years. The Langford money came from real estate development and something to do with venture capital that Elena did not fully understand. What she understood was the gap. The absolute distance between the life Sophie inhabited and the life Elena inhabited. Sophie's shoes cost more than Elena's monthly rent. Her perfume, a delicate floral scent called Cristal, filled rooms with abundance. Elena owned 1 bottle of drugstore shampoo that she used for her hair, her body, and sometimes, when she needed to feel less disgusting, her clothes. Elena's own room, the converted closet, contained exactly 7 possessions of value. A mattress. 2 work uniforms. 1 good dress that she had bought second-hand for $14 in case she ever needed to go somewhere important, though nowhere important would ever ask for her. A coffee tin that held $200, hidden beneath a loose floorboard because she did not trust walls. A laptop from 2015 that took 4 minutes to boot up. A phone that was held together with duct tape. And in a showbox on the highest shelf, a pair of tiny yellow shoes. Emma's first shoes. Soft leather, the color of butter, with a buckle shaped like a daisy. Sophie had thrown them away 3 months ago, declaring them hideous, a waste of space. Elena had pulled them from the trash when Sophie was not looking. She cleaned them carefully and placed them in the showbox and kept them in her closet. She did not know why. Some instinct told her that these shoes mattered, that they held something precious, something worth saving. That particular evening, the one that would change everything, Elena sat on her mattress with her laptop balanced on her knees. The screen illuminated her face, casting shadows across features that had grown sharp from exhaustion and years of not quite eating enough. She opened her bank account, and the number that appeared seemed to mock her, $203. She pulled out her wallet, which was made of cracked leather and held together through sheer force of will, and counted the bills and coins. $17.32. That brought her total to $220.32 in the entire world. The $150,000 surgery hung over her head like a blade. Emma had been born with a condition that had no name in Elena's vocabulary but which Sophie referred to with the kind of casual cruelty only the wealthy could manage. The child's legs did not function properly. The doctors said it was neurological. The treatment required an experimental procedure at a hospital 3 states away. The cost was catastrophic. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was Sophie's ultimatum, delivered while she was having her nails done, not even looking at Elena. Find the money for the surgery, Elena, or Emma goes into the state system. That's what happens when guardians cannot afford care. The state takes them. You understand? Elena understood perfectly. She placed her forehead against the warm laptop screen and let herself breathe. In through her nose. Out through her mouth. This was something she had learned years ago. You could survive anything if you knew how to breathe through it. Outside, November rain began to fall. Not gentle November rain, but the kind that came to San Francisco like a judgment, heavy and relentless, turning the streets into rivers of reflected neon and streetlight. The kind of rain that sounded like the world was crying and would not stop for a very long time. Elena closed the laptop. She did not undress. She simply lay down on her mattress, still wearing her work clothes, black pants and a black button-down shirt that she had ironed that morning, and stared at the ceiling. In the darkness, the basement was so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat, steady and determined and refusing to stop despite everything her mind was screaming. She thought about Douglas Hale, though she tried not to. Thinking about him was dangerous. It opened doors that had taken years to seal shut. 8 years ago, Elena had been 21 years old and working at the Grand View Hotel, a mid-range establishment downtown that attracted business travelers and tourists who had not yet learned that San Francisco was expensive. She had been a housekeeper then, cleaning rooms, making beds, scrubbing bathrooms for $7.50 an hour plus tips that rarely came. Douglas Hale was the night manager. 52 years old, with thinning hair combed across a scalp that shone when the light caught it wrong. He wore polyester shirts that clung to his body and gold rings on most of his fingers. He had small eyes that moved across women's bodies the way a predator's eyes move across terrain, calculating, hungry. One October night, Elena was cleaning room 412 when she heard the lock click behind her. Douglas stood in the doorway, blocking the exit. He was smiling, and his teeth were very yellow. "You're alone," he said. Elena said nothing. She had learned by then that saying nothing was sometimes the safest response. "I've been watching you," he continued, stepping into the room. "Always so quiet. Always so polite. The guests love you. They leave better tips for you than anyone else." He paused. "Those tips are company property, you understand?" "I understand," Elena whispered. "Do you?" He moved closer. She could smell his cologne, something cheap and overwhelming. "Because I don't think you do. I think you're stealing from me. I think you've been stealing from me for months." Elena had stolen nothing. Her tips, meager as they were, she had earned honestly. But she knew that arguing would be futile. She knew that whatever was about to happen had already been decided. He locked the door behind him. Not the standard lock. He engaged the deadbolt, the safety chain, turned a second lock that should not have been there but was. "Please," Elena said. He hit her across the face with an open hand. The sound of it echoed off the bathroom tiles. Her vision went white, then black, then slowly returned. There was blood in her mouth. Copper and salt and her own surrender. He forced her into the bathroom. He used a leather belt, his own belt, which he removed slowly, deliberately, to mark her back. 8 lines. 8 lessons about the cost of resistance. She did not scream. She could not scream. She covered her own mouth with her own hand and made sounds like an animal that is dying slowly and knows it cannot run. When he was finished, he cleaned himself in the bathroom sink using the same small towels that Elena had folded that morning. He fixed his hair. He adjusted his rings. He looked at her, at the marks on her back, at the blood beginning to seep through her uniform, and he smiled. "If you tell anyone," he said, and his voice was soft, almost gentle, "I will destroy you. I will tell everyone you stole from me. I will tell them you stole from guests. I will make sure you never work in this city again. Do you understand?" Elena understood. She did not report him. She went back to her apartment, a room in a house with 7 other renters, and she tried to clean the wounds herself. Some of them were deep enough that they needed stitches, but she could not afford a hospital. She kept them clean with water from the tap and bandages she stole from a CVS. The marks faded over 8 years to white threads, thin scars that looked like someone had dragged a fingernail across her skin. 2 months later, she found the nanny position with the Langfords. Better pay. Room and board. A chance to disappear. She took it without hesitation. Now, lying in her converted closet, Elena could still feel those scars. Not with pain, the pain had faded years ago, but with pressure, like something was sitting on her chest, something heavy and permanent. She raised her shirt and pressed her fingers against the marks. Still there. Still proof. Still a reminder that the world had no mercy for women with nothing. Outside, the rain intensified. She heard it drumming against the small basement window that sat at street level. Footsteps passed above her head, Sophie and Michael returning from wherever they had been. Their footsteps were unhurried, confident, the footsteps of people who owned their place in the world. Elena closed her eyes. She would wake at 5. She would dress Emma. She would pretend that $220.32 was enough to save a child. She would smile. She would be invisible. She would survive. She did not know that in 5 hours, her ancient Honda would sputter and die on Highway 101 heading south, steam rising from the engine into the November cold. She did not know that 3 black SUVs would appear through the rain like sharks drawn to blood. She did not know that a man named Nicholas Marino would step into the darkness, water streaming down his face, and that everything she thought she understood about survival would be unmade. She only knew that she had $220.32, and the people she loved needed everything. The November rain fell in sheets that turned Highway 101 into a ribbon of black glass, and Elena Harper's ancient Honda sputtered once, twice, and died. Steam rose from the engine into the freezing night like smoke from something burning, and the silence that followed was absolute. She sat in darkness, hands gripping the steering wheel, watching neon reflection streak across her windshield, red, white, amber, the colors of a city she was trying to escape. Her phone showed 3% battery and no signal. The interview at the San Mateo bakery was in 20 minutes. She would not make it. The breakdown had been inevitable. The mechanic had quoted $400 for the transmission repair 2 months ago. Elena had the money then, barely, but the Langfords had not paid her for 3 weeks. Then Emma needed school supplies. Then the car started making that sound. Elena had driven anyway, coaxing it forward with prayers and curses, knowing this day would come. It had come on the worst possible night, on a highway with no shoulder, during a storm that seemed designed to erase the world. She turned the key. The engine groaned and died. She turned it again. Nothing. Through the downpour, headlights appeared. 3 vehicles, moving in formation, their engines cutting through the storm like predators. Black SUVs, massive and deliberate, the kind that did not belong on highways with broken-down Hondas. The lead vehicle slowed. Elena's breath caught. The rear door opened, and a man stepped into the rain without hesitation, water streaming down his face immediately, soaking through a suit that probably cost more than Elena earned in 6 months. Nicholas Marino was 47, 6'2", built like someone who had survived knife fights and walked away from things that should have killed him. His dark hair was slicked to his skull by rain. A silver scar ran from his left eye to his cheekbone, thin and precise as a blade. His movements were controlled, deliberate, the way a predator moves when it is not hunting but simply existing. When he reached Elena's window, she could see his eyes even through the downpour, storm gray, intelligent, carrying the weight of decisions no human should have to make. Elena rolled down the window a crack. "Your car is dead," Nicholas said. "Not a question." His voice was rough, accented with something Mediterranean, deep and solid like an oath. "I can see that," Elena replied, trying to keep her voice steady, though her hands trembled on the steering wheel. She was acutely aware of her soaking clothes, her wet hair clinging to her face, the fact that she was alone on a dark highway with a stranger and 2 men emerging from the other SUVs. "You cannot stay here," Nicholas continued, studying her through the rain. "The highway patrol will tow you within the hour and charge you $300 you do not have. Your phone has no signal. The nearest town is 12 miles south. You will not make it." Elena's breath caught. How did he know? Her phone was inside the car. The tow charge, how could he possibly know her financial situation with such precision? "Get in the vehicle," Nicholas said. It was not a request. "My men will handle your car." "I don't know you," Elena said, and the words came out smaller than she intended. Nicholas studied her for a long moment. The rain intensified, drumming on the roof of her Honda like accusations. "No. But I know what it looks like when someone is out of options. I have been there. I have stood on a highway in weather exactly like this with nothing and no one, and I survived because someone chose to help me. You can trust me or you can freeze. Choose quickly." Something in his eyes, not kindness, but recognition, the way someone looks at you when they have seen your particular kind of desperation before, made Elena open the door. She grabbed her canvas bag, the one containing the showbox with Emma's tiny shoes, and stepped into the rain. One of the men, older, with a scarred face and the bearing of someone accustomed to violence, held an umbrella that did nothing against the storm. The other man, younger and dark-eyed, was already on his phone arranging a tow. The older man opened the rear door of the lead SUV, and Elena climbed in, shivering, water pooling on the leather seat. Nicholas slid in beside her, and the convoy moved, pulling back onto the highway. The interior smelled of leather and expensive cologne, of heated air and safety. Elena's teeth chattered. "Where were you going?" Nicholas asked. Elena hesitated. "A job interview. A bakery in San Mateo. But I have missed it now." "What kind of work?" "Anything that pays." Elena pulled her wet hair away from her face. "I have been searching for 2 months. Most places will not hire you if you do not have a permanent address. I gave them the Langford's address, but they want someone local. Someone stable. I am neither." Nicholas nodded slowly, his eyes on the road ahead where rain obscured everything. The windshield wipers moved back and forth in hypnotic rhythm. "I am going to my lodge in the mountains. A family emergency. You will come with me tonight because there is nowhere else safe in this storm, and tomorrow I will have you driven wherever you need to go. This is not a negotiation. What is your name?" "Elena." "Elena Harper." "I am Nicholas. This is Tony." He gestured to the older man in the front passenger seat. "And Pietro." The younger man, driving the middle vehicle behind them, would remain unseen. "You will be safe with us. That is a guarantee." Elena should have been afraid. Protocol screamed at her to refuse, to insist they return her to her car, to avoid men in expensive suits who traveled in convoys and made decisions for other people. But something in his certainty, in the way he had seen her standing on that dark highway and made an instant decision to help, cracked something open inside her chest. The possibility, however small, that someone finally saw her. That her existence had registered with another human being as worthy of intervention. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay," Nicholas repeated, and something flickered across his expression, recognition, perhaps, or the satisfaction of someone accustomed to getting exactly what he wanted. What Elena did not know, as the convoy pushed through the storm toward Lake Tahoe, was that Nicholas Marino had not stopped on that highway by chance. His men monitored police frequencies and traffic reports. They had received a call about a disabled vehicle and had been less than a mile away when his phone buzzed with the information. What Elena could not have known was that Nicholas's family emergency was urgent enough to pull him from the city in the middle of the night, and that her arrival at the lodge would feel, to him, like an answer to a prayer he had forgotten how to make. The lodge appeared through the blizzard like something from a dream, stone and timber, windows glowing gold, smoke rising from a massive chimney into the white darkness. The convoy pulled into a circular drive, and Nicholas led Elena inside. The warmth hit her immediately, along with the smell of cedar and wood smoke. A massive stone fireplace dominated the main room, logs crackling with fierce, orange light. The leather furniture was worn soft from years of use. But it was the sound that made Elena freeze, a faint cry from upstairs, the wail of an infant, thin and desperate and inconsolable. Nicholas's entire body changed. The controlled stillness vanished, replaced by tension so acute it seemed to vibrate through him. A woman descended the stairs, the night nurse, her red-rimmed eyes betraying hours of failed comfort. "Mr. Marino, the baby has not stopped crying for 3 hours. Nothing helps. We have checked his vitals, his temperature, his—" Nicholas was already moving toward the staircase. He did not ask permission or explanation. He simply looked back at Elena and said, "Come." She followed him up the stairs, her soaking clothes dripping on the carpet, her heart hammering. This was a man accustomed to being obeyed, and he had made a decision that included her. The nursery door opened to warmth and soft light. A specialized crib held a 6-month-old boy with dark hair and his father's exact bone structure. The baby's legs lay motionless beneath a blanket, and 3 doctors stood in consultation near a wall lined with medical equipment. "Tell me there is progress," Nicholas said. Dr. Raymond, the eldest, shook his head slowly. "Complete lower paralysis. The spinal nerve damage from birth was more extensive than we initially assessed. We have attempted every standard intervention. Physical therapy, electrical stimulation, pharmaceutical treatment. The consensus from Johns Hopkins is that this is likely permanent." "Permanent," Nicholas repeated the word like it was a curse. "I am sorry, Mr. Marino. There is nothing more we can do." Elena watched Nicholas stare at his son, and for the first time, she saw his armor crack. The man who had stopped for a stranger on a dark highway, who commanded absolute authority, was helpless. Power, however absolute, meant nothing against the paralysis of his child. His hands trembled as they hung at his sides. Elena stepped forward. "May I?" she asked quietly. Everyone turned. Nicholas studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Elena approached the crib and knelt beside the baby boy. She placed her hands on his small legs, feeling the temperature of his skin, the absence of response. She began to hum, low, rhythmic, a melody her grandmother had taught her in the shelter where they lived when Elena was 8 years old. It was not medicine. It was not therapy. It was simply presence, simply warmth, simply the touch of someone who understood, in her bones, what it meant to be broken and still. The baby's crying softened. Then stopped. Then, his right foot twitched. A small, involuntary movement that sent every doctor in the room to immediate attention. Dr. Raymond gasped. "That's impossible. The nerve damage." The baby's toes curled. Once, twice, then again. Deliberate now, responsive. Nicholas dropped to his knees beside Elena, his hand shaking as he reached toward his son. "What did you do?" he whispered. Elena looked at him, confused. "Nothing. Sometimes babies respond to touch. To being seen." But the doctors were moving now, their instruments confirming what seemed medically impossible. Movement where there should be none. Sensation where the paralysis had been absolute. Dr. Patel's voice trembled. This is unexplainable. The spinal imaging was clear. Complete nerve death. And yet... Yet what? Nicholas demanded. Yet he is responding. I do not have a medical explanation for what just happened. Tony, standing in the doorway, exchanged a glance with Pietro. In 15 years of working for Nicholas Marino, they had never witnessed anything like this. Never seen their boss on his knees. Never seen his hands shake. An hour later, in the main room by the fire, Nicholas poured Elena tea with steady hands, though his eyes remained distant. Elena sat wrapped in a borrowed sweater, her soaked clothes in the dryer, her feet bare against the warm stone floor. The firelight cast dancing shadows across her face. Tell me who you are, Nicholas said. It was not a request. Elena wrapped her cold hands around the mug. My name is Elena Harper. I have been working as a live-in nanny for the Langford family in San Francisco for 8 months. Sophie Langford is a woman who believes that cruelty is a form of management. I work 14-hour days. My room is a converted closet that smells like mildew. I have been paid $800 for the last month, and I am supposed to be grateful for the opportunity. Why do you stay? Because I have nowhere else to go, Elena said simply. Before the Langfords, there was a place called the Grandview Hotel. I worked in housekeeping. The manager was a man named Douglas Hale. Nicholas leaned forward slightly. What did he do to you? Elena set down the tea with shaking hands. She turned, lifted the back of her sweater just enough to reveal the edge of white scars running across her shoulders and down her spine. Lines crisscrossing in every direction like a map of pain, of hands that had no right to touch, of nights that had no ending. 8 years ago, he decided I was his property, Elena said quietly. When I tried to leave, he made sure I understood the consequences of disobedience. I worked there for another 4 years after that. I could not leave. I had no money. No family. No one who would believe me against a man with authority and connections. I saved every dollar, every tip. When I had enough for a deposit, I quit without notice and never looked back. Nicholas's hands curved into fists. His breathing changed, deepening, becoming something dangerous and controlled. When he spoke, his voice dropped to something deadly quiet. Where is he now? Still managing the Grandview Hotel. Still stealing from girls who cannot fight back. Still untouched because no one believes them, and everyone believes him. Nicholas stood and walked to the window. Outside, the snow fell in absolute silence, covering everything in white. You said you are nobody, he said, not turning around. You said this in your voice, the way you said it, as though you believed it. I need you to listen to me, Elena. You are not nobody. The people who did this to you believed you were nobody, and that belief needs to be corrected. Elena felt something shift inside her chest, some small locked door opening. The next morning, her phone rang. Sophie Langford's voice cut through the speaker sharp as glass. Where are you? Emma has been crying for you since dawn. You were supposed to be back by midnight. I need you here in 2 hours or you are fired, and you can forget about your last paycheck. Consider it payment for the inconvenience of your absence. The line went dead. Elena stared at the phone. 2 weeks of work. $320. Money that was supposed to help her leave, to build something, to survive. Nicholas, who had overheard from across the room, pulled out his phone. He made a single call, speaking in low, rapid Italian. Within the hour, a courier arrived at the Langford mansion with $320 in cash and a single message: Elena Harper resigns effective immediately. When Sophie called back, her voice shrill with rage and threats, Nicholas answered Elena's phone himself. Ms. Langford, he said, his voice perfectly controlled. Elena no longer works for you. If you contact her again, I will buy your husband's company and dissolve it for entertainment. Do we understand each other? The silence that followed was answer enough. That evening, a snow fell outside the lodge windows and Elena sat beside Nicholas's son in the nursery, the baby's foot twitching regularly now, responding, healing. Nicholas made his proposal. "Stay here," he said. "Help my son. The doctors cannot explain what happened, but I do not need explanations. I need results. I will pay you $5,000 per week, plus a private room, plus anything you need." Elena stared at him. $5,000. That is because you are not nobody, Elena. You never were. She nodded, understanding that everything had changed, though she did not yet know how much, or how far, or what price was still to be paid. The November rain fell in sheets against the coffee shop window, turning San Francisco into a blur of neon and wet concrete. Elena Harper stood frozen with a paper cup of black coffee in her trembling hand, watching the man across the street. Douglas Hale. 52 years old, thinner than she remembered, but carrying that same predatory smile like a weapon he had perfected over decades. His eyes found hers through the glass, and he crossed the street without hesitation, his movements deliberate, unhurried, like a blade cutting through air. Elena turned to leave. She did not make it 2 steps. Douglas's hand closed around her arm, his fingers pressing into the exact spot where old bruises used to form, bruises that had faded to nothing but the memory of pain remained sharp. His voice was a whisper meant only for her, dripping with venom. "Elena Harper. I heard you found yourself a rich protector. How much are you charging him per hour? Is he paying well for the damaged goods?" "Let me go," Elena said, her voice steady despite the ice water flooding her veins. "You think you can disappear? You think I do not have friends in high places? I know where you are staying. I know about the sick little baby boy. Such a shame if something happened to him. Accidents occur all the time with sick children. Nobody would even question it." Elena yanked her arm free, the movement sharp and sudden. "Touch me again and you will regret it." Douglas laughed, a sound like glass breaking. "You are still the same scared little girl I remember. Still nobody." He straightened his jacket, checked his watch with theatrical slowness, and walked away, disappearing into the crowd as if the moment had meant nothing to him at all. Elena stood on the sidewalk, rain soaking through her thin jacket, her hand shaking so violently she could barely hold her phone. She dialed Nicholas. He answered on the second ring. "Douglas Hale is in the city," she said, her voice trembling like a candle in the wind. "He found me. He knows where we are. He made threats about Marco." There was a single moment of absolute silence. Then Nicholas spoke, his voice deep and solid like an oath, like thunder rolling across a distant sky. "Where are you?" "Pine and Fourth. Stay inside the coffee shop. Do not move. I am sending Tony and Pietro. You will be safe in 8 minutes. Elena, listen to me. You are not alone anymore." But Elena was not thinking about being alone. She was thinking about Marco, 9 months old now, his small legs kicking with strength that doctors called impossible. She was thinking about how she had brought this danger to him simply by existing, simply by learning to hope. That same evening, while Elena was back at the lodge with Marco, while she was watching his small legs move with increasing confidence, Nicholas sat in the corner of the Grand Meridian Ballroom for a charity gala he did not want to attend. 1,200 of San Francisco's wealthiest citizens filled the hall, champagne glasses raised, smiles painted on like masks. He stood apart, watching, his black suit cutting a sharp line against the gilt and marble. Sophie Langford appeared from the crowd like a ghost materializing in daylight. Her white designer dress cost more than Elena earned in 6 months. Her smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Mr. Moreno," Sophie said, her voice carrying across the space between them. "I feel I should warn you about the woman you have employed. Elena Harper has a history of instability. She stole from my family, she frightened my daughter Emma, and I have documentation of deeply erratic behavior. I would hate for your precious son to be put at risk by someone so fundamentally broken." Nicholas turned to face her fully. His lieutenants, who had been standing nearby, immediately moved closer, reading the shift in his posture like men who had learned to speak the language of violence without words being spoken. "Ms. Langford," Nicholas said, his voice ice-cold, precision-carved, "I have documentation of your husband's embezzlement of client funds totaling $2.3 million. I have records of your personal involvement in a labor trafficking network that employs undocumented workers at below minimum wage. I have testimony from 14 workers who have named you specifically in statements to federal agents. I suggest you leave this ballroom before I make a single phone call that ends your freedom permanently. Do we understand each other?" Sophie's face drained to white. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. But then something shifted in her expression, something cruel and calculating. She leaned in close enough that only Nicholas could hear her whisper. "You cannot protect her forever. People like her always end up where they belong. Invisible. Worthless. Forgotten. That is the natural order of things, and no amount of money can change it." She walked away, disappearing into the crowd, but her words hung in the air like poison. That night, Elena stood on the lodge's back deck in the November rain. The temperature had dropped, and snow was beginning to fall, turning to sleet before it hit the ground. The sleet stung her face like tiny accusations. She gripped the wooden railing so hard her knuckles turned white, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. Inside the lodge, warmth and light. Inside was Marco, 9 months old, his small legs kicking with increasing strength. Inside was Nicholas, who had looked at her when she was nobody and seen someone worth saving. But Douglas Hale's threat echoed in her mind, accidents occur all the time with sick children. And Sophie Langford's whisper, people like her always end up where they belong. Invisible. Elena pulled out her phone with trembling hands. She typed out a resignation message to Nicholas. Her finger hovered over the send button. Maybe they were right. Maybe she brought danger to everyone she touched. Maybe invisible was all she would ever be, and the sooner she accepted it, the sooner people she loved would be safe. Then she saw him through the window. Nicholas, holding Marco, the baby's legs kicking against his chest, moving freely, responding, healing. And Elena understood something that shifted the entire weight of her existence. I did not make the impossible happen by staying invisible. I made it happen by being present. By being seen. By refusing to disappear. She deleted the text. Walk back inside. Nicholas looked up from Marco, saw her soaked and shaking, and simply opened his arms. Elena stepped into the embrace, and for the first time in 8 years, she cried. Not from fear. From relief. From the knowledge that she was no longer invisible, and that visibility itself was power. Nicholas made 2 phone calls that night. The first was to FBI agent Caroline Reeves, who had been building a federal case against Sophie Langford's husband for 18 months. Nicholas provided everything, financial records documenting $2.3 million in embezzled funds, witness statements from 14 workers, and Elena's own testimony about the trafficking network she had witnessed firsthand during her years at the Langford mansion. The second call was to Tony and Pietro. At exactly 5:56 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, 12 men in black tactical gear moved like ghosts through the Grandview Hotel. Douglas Hale was in his basement office doing what he had done every week for 8 years, counting the stolen tips, the money he skimmed from the servers who worked 16-hour shifts for $5 an hour. $3,400 in cash lay spread across his desk when Tony kicked the door open. Douglas stumbled backward, his face draining of color, his hands shaking so violently he knocked the money to the floor. What is this? You cannot. We can, Tony said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of 15 years of loyalty to Nicholas. Pietro stepped forward with a folder. Inside were 8 years of documentation, every stolen tip, every forced overtime shift without pay, every threat and degradation. Photographs of Elena's scars with medical verification of the abuse. Testimony from 14 servers, each statement precise, each one damning. Federal agents are 3 minutes out, Pietro said, checking his watch with clinical precision. You are going to prison for labor trafficking, wage theft, and assault. The servers you abused over the years? 14 of them are providing testimony. You are finished. Douglas collapsed to his knees, trembling like a cornered animal, his face crumpling like discarded paper. Please. I will pay whatever you want. I will disappear. I will. Tony crouched beside him. Begging does not suit you. You should have thought about this before you touched Elena Harper. The FBI arrived at 5:51 a.m. Douglas Hale was led out in handcuffs, the metal glinting under the fluorescent lights of his own hotel. By 7 a.m., his face was on every news channel, his name synonymous with exploitation and cruelty. But Sophie Langford's arrest was different. It was public. It was thorough. It was designed to erase her. FBI agent Caroline Reeves led the raid personally, arriving at the Pacific Heights mansion during a Tuesday morning breakfast party. Sophie sat at a table of 12 of San Francisco's most prominent women, her white designer dress pristine, her coffee cup frozen halfway to her lips, when agents swarmed through the doors. Sophie Langford, Agent Reeves said, reading from a warrant that detailed everything: embezzlement, trafficking, fraud, conspiracy. You are under arrest. Sophie's voice rose to a shriek. Do you know who I am? My lawyers will destroy you. My family has. Your lawyers, Agent Reeves interrupted, her voice calm and certain, are currently being questioned about their role in concealing your crimes. You are looking at 40 years in federal prison. That is not quick. That is not easy. That is not merciful. But it is all the law allows. Sophie was led out in designer heels and handcuffs, news cameras flashing, her public humiliation total and irreversible. The society women at her table sat in stunned silence, their coffee growing cold, their loyalty evaporating like morning mist. On the courthouse steps, a reporter asked Agent Reeves about the investigation. Reeves smiled slightly. This prosecution was made possible by the courage of victims who finally found their voices. Justice belongs to them. That evening, Elena watched the news coverage with Nicholas and Marco. The baby slept against her chest, his legs twitching gently, healing, moving toward a future without limitations. Elena's phone buzzed with a message from one of the 14 servers who had testified. A single sentence: thank you for being brave enough to be seen. Elena looked at Nicholas. He took her hand. Outside, the November rain had stopped, and the sky was beginning to clear. 6 months later, the November rain has become a memory, and Elena Harper lives in a way she never believed possible. Her apartment sits on the 3rd floor of a building with working heat, with windows that open onto sunlight, with rooms that smell like fresh coffee instead of mildew and fear. The lease is hers alone. The refrigerator holds food she bought, not scraps from someone else's table. She owns 7 pairs of shoes now, and not a single one of them has a hole worn through the sole. Nursing school consumes her mornings and afternoons. She sits in lecture halls where professors know her name, where she raises her hand without flinching, where she takes notes that will someday help her save lives instead of merely surviving her own. The irony is not lost on her. For 8 years, Douglas Hale taught her that her hands were only useful for service, for cleaning, for erasing evidence of other people's crimes. Now those same hands learn anatomy, pharmacology, the science of healing. The evenings belong to the shelter. Elena volunteers 3 nights a week at the Harbor House, a safe refuge for women whose bruises tell the same stories hers once did. She sits with them in the common room, drinks tea that steams in chipped mugs, and listens to the parts of themselves they have learned to hide. She does not offer solutions. She offers presence. She offers the simple radical act of being seen. Marco Marino, now almost 2 years old, runs on legs that bend and stretch and carry him across grass without limitation. His paralysis, that crushing diagnosis from months ago, exists now only in medical files and in Elena's memory as proof that some impossible things do happen. His medical team, 3 physical therapists, 2 neurologists, 1 specialist in pediatric recovery, comes to Nicholas's home every Tuesday and Friday. But it is Elena who braids his dark hair before school, who reads to him from picture books, whose voice he reaches for when he wakes from nightmares. Elena is not his nanny anymore. That distinction matters in ways she did not understand 6 months ago. Nicholas Marino appears at her apartment on a Thursday evening in June without warning. She opens the door to find him standing in the hallway, and the shock of it nearly stops her heart. He is not dressed in the black suits that signal his empire, not surrounded by the careful distance his men maintain. Instead, he wears a simple charcoal sweater, jeans, leather shoes that cost more than her monthly rent but look ordinary in his hands. His dark eyes carry something she has never seen in them before. Uncertainty. Elena, he says, and her name sounds different when he speaks it. Heavier. Sacred. What are you doing here? Her voice comes out smaller than she intends. I need to tell you something. And I have waited 6 months because you needed time to become who you were always meant to be. Not my employee. Not someone who owes me. My equal. He pauses, and in that pause, the entire hallway seems to hold its breath. May I come in? She steps aside without speaking. He enters her small apartment like he is entering a sanctuary, careful, reverent. They move to the window that overlooks the city lights beginning to glow as the sun touches the horizon. The sky bleeds orange and gold and deep violet. Outside, the city hums with the sound of people living their lives, unaware that something is shifting in this small room. They sit, and Nicholas turns to face her. His hands rest on his thighs, and she notices that his knuckles are unmarked. His nails are clean. He looks like a man who has not thrown a punch in months. When I found you on that highway, he begins slowly, choosing each word like he is building something fragile, I saw someone out of options. Someone the world had decided was disposable. I helped because someone once helped me. My father's business partner, Marco's grandfather, pulled me out of the streets when I was 17 and starving. I promised myself I would repay that mercy. So I saw you, and I saw the chance to honor an old debt. Elena watches him. She does not interrupt. But somewhere between that night and now, something changed. You stopped being the woman I saved. You became the woman who saved herself, and you let me watch. You became the woman who holds a child like he is precious beyond measure. You became the woman who stands in front of other women and teaches them their own strength. His voice deepens. You became everything I did not know I was searching for. Nicholas, Elena starts, but he raises a hand gently. You are the first person in 15 years to make me feel like I could be something other than my father's vengeance. You make me want to be the man who deserves the way Marco looks at you. The way I look at you. He reaches out and takes her hand. His palm is warm. His grip is gentle. I am not asking you for anything. I am simply telling you the truth. I have fallen in love with you. With your strength. With the way you stand back up every single time. If you feel nothing, I will leave and we will remain friends. But if you feel even a fraction of what I feel... Elena kisses him. It is not desperate. It is not needy. It is the kiss of two people who have survived hell and found each other on the other side of it. When they break apart, their foreheads touch. I love you too, Elena whispers. I have for months. But I needed to know I could stand on my own first. I needed to know that I was choosing you, not running to you. And can you? Nicholas asks. Stand on your own. Yes, Elena says. She pulls back far enough to meet his eyes. Which means I am choosing you not because I need you, but because I want you. Because the woman I have become wants the man you are becoming. They sit together as the city lights blur softly through the window, as the sky deepens to indigo, as the noise of the street below fades into the rhythm of their breathing. Two people who learned that real strength is not found in never falling but in always standing back up. 1 year later, at a mountain lodge in the Sierras during summer, the tiny yellow shoes sit on a desk made of reclaimed wood. These are the shoes Elena saved from Sophie Langford's trash can when Marco was 3 months old and could not move his legs. They are faded now, the lace is worn, the sole scuffed. But they are perfect. Marco runs across the lawn in front of the lodge, his legs pumping, his laughter carrying across the grass like bells. He is chasing a butterfly that dances just beyond his reach, teaching him the oldest lesson of childhood: some things are meant to be pursued, not caught. His legs, those impossible legs that were supposed to remain paralyzed, carry him forward without hesitation. Elena and Nicholas watch from the porch. Her hand rests in his. Her wedding ring, a simple platinum band with a diamond that belonged to his mother, catches the afternoon light. "What are you thinking?" Nicholas asks. Elena smiles. "That I used to be invisible. That I believed the lies carved into my skin were the truth. That invisible was the safest way to exist." She pauses. "And now I cannot imagine ever disappearing again." In a federal penitentiary 300 miles south, Douglas Hale sits in a cell counting the 40 years he will spend inside. His name is no longer whispered in the corridors of the hotels where he once ruled. His reputation is ashes. The servers he exploited have received restitution. The women he trafficked have been granted asylum and support. In a women's federal facility, Sophie Langford sits on a bunk, her designer clothes replaced by prison gray, her fortune seized by the government, her social standing obliterated. She was a ghost before. Now she is less than that. Elena runs the Harbor House Foundation now, funded by Nicholas but managed entirely by her own mind, her own integrity, her own vision. They provide legal aid, emergency housing, counseling, job training for women escaping abuse. The foundation bears no man's name. It bears hers. The tiny yellow shoes sit on her office desk as a reminder, something precious, something worth saving. Like the women she works with every day. Like herself. Nicholas pulls Elena close on the porch. He kisses her temple, and the motion is so tender it makes her chest ache. "Thank you," he says. "For what?" "For teaching me that real strength is not found in never falling but in always standing back up. No matter how many times they knock you down." And in that moment, Elena Harper realizes that she was not saved on a November highway. She was simply seen. And once you are truly seen by another human being, you can never be invisible again. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel, like and share this video with the people you love. Every comment you leave is a precious source of motivation. We wish all of you good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace.